Hello everybody, and welcome to this very special series where we're looking at Pluto and his transit through each of the whole sign houses. I'm so excited to be sharing this series with you. If you like this video, then please like, share and subscribe to my channel. And if you would like to study astrology further and in depth with me and even gain a certification if you desire, then please consider joining my classes at the Royal Stars Academy. The link is in the description below. Now, on the 23rd of March 2023, which is ahead in time at the moment that I am recording this, but maybe you're watching this after that has occurred, Pluto will make his first foray into the sign of Aquarius since he was last there in 1781. Now, it's been a long time between Aquarian transits for the little planet Pluto. As such, I thought it would be a good time to talk about Pluto changing signs and what it will mean for everyone depending on your rising sign in whole sign astrology. So this video series will be applicable whenever Pluto changes signs in the future. But as I'm recording this in the run-up to Pluto in Aquarius in 2023, it's very pertinent to us now and will be pertinent to us for almost 20 years as Pluto moves through this sign, the sign of Aquarius. Now, Pluto is an unusual planet in astrology and also in astronomy. So for a start, he has an elliptical orbit, which means that he spends different lengths of time in each zodiac sign. I'm going to talk about the lengths of time a little later in this introduction. But check out this diagram of Pluto's orbit and you'll see how different it is to all the other planets in the solar system. So let's look a little more now at the astronomy of Pluto. So although astronomically it's classified as a dwarf planet, in astrology we all know that Pluto packs a massive punch, but more on the astrology of Pluto a little bit later. However, just because an object is small and because an object is far away doesn't mean that it's not powerful. Pluto is atomically powerful, and anyone who's familiar with astrology will know that he is really punchy. So our moon, Luna, it weighs 6 times as much as Pluto does. It's more hefty in that sense. First little tidbit of information astronomically about Pluto. We realize that he is a small object at the far reaches of the solar system. It's quite amazing that we know of his existence, actually, especially as our moon is more weighty than he is. It takes 248 years for Pluto to do a complete cycle around the sun. And Pluto's average surface temperature is a very chilly minus 230 degrees Celsius. It actually feels like that today where I am as I'm recording this in the middle of winter. Minus 280 degrees Celsius is actually minus 382 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can imagine, wherever you are in the world, how cold that actually is. Not surprising considering Pluto is at the far reaches of the solar system, a long way from the sun. Now, Pluto has 5 known moons and is classified, as I said, as one of the dwarf planets, along with Eris, who is the largest of the dwarf planets, but also Haumea, Makemake, and Ceres. They're the other dwarf planets that we know of. Now, Pluto was discovered in 1930 by the American astronomer Clyde Tombaugh, and in fact, there's we'll talk about this in a minute, but there is a glacier on Pluto that they've named after the man who discovered Pluto. And Pluto resides in the Kuiper belt at the very edge of the solar system beyond Neptune. And the name Pluto was actually suggested by a young 11-year-old child named Venetia Burney, and she was a mythology lover. So contrary to popular opinion, she didn't name Pluto after the Disney dog. In fact, the naming of the Disney dog came not long after the naming of the tiny planet, who was named after Pluto in ancient mythology. And we're going to talk about that very soon. One thing that fascinates me about Pluto is that when the shuttle, the New Horizons shuttle, went past Pluto in 2015, it took some photos as it passed by this tiny planet. Once again, check out these photos. Now you'll notice this heart-shaped colouring on the side of Pluto. I find this fascinating. Well, this is a glacier named after the discoverer of Pluto, and it's a glacier of frozen nitrogen. Now, due to the heat or the temperature below the surface of this glacier, this heart shape slowly churns over the course of millennia. So it changes over the course of millennia. And scientists believe that the glacial churning is ice continually refreshing itself, which is why the glacier actually shows no signs of craterial impact. You know, like there's moons, Pluto has 5 moons, and they all show evidence of having been hit by, having craters because they've been hit by asteroids and things like that. This glacier has no evidence of that because of this churning that refreshes it. Keep that in mind. Keep the word refreshing in mind because it correlates as above, so below to how we understand Pluto in astrology. And keep in mind the significance of our first human beholding of Pluto, which revealed this beating heart. It refreshes, and you know, it expands and contracts and expands and contracts as part of its refreshing process. It ebbs and flows with the cycles of the warming and cooling that Pluto experiences as it travels around the sun. Because sometimes Pluto is closer to the sun than at other times, and that affects its speed as it travels through the zodiac signs. So, in essence, Pluto's temperature ebbs and flows, which causes this heart to ebb and flow as it refreshes its cycle. It's the beating heart of Pluto. This is very important to remember when we come to talk about the astrology shortly. Now, scientists also believe that when Pluto was a very young planet, it probably contained a H2O ocean, a water ocean. In fact, it's also likely to have some sort of water in an oceanic form still in existence underneath its icy crust. But of course, we haven't landed on Pluto to determine that. We're only surmising. So it's a planet of mysteries astronomically that are slowly but surely being revealed to all of humanity. And I find all these discoveries to be very exciting, especially when we see the world through the lens of the as above, so below Hermetic principle. What about the mythology of Pluto? Well, Pluto was in mythology the son of the Titan god Saturn, and he was one of 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and 2 of the brothers and the 3 sisters were eaten by Saturn or Kronos, and these gods that were eaten, these brothers and sisters that were eaten, were known collectively as the Olympians, and they were vomited up when they were rescued by their heroic brother and king of the gods, Jupiter. And I talked about the mythology of Jupiter in my series on Jupiter transiting through all the houses, if you want to check that out. But Pluto is one of these 3 supreme male deities of the ancient Olympian Parthenon, along with his siblings, Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, they were the masculine ones, and his sisters, Juno, Vesta, and Ceres, the 6 of them. So Pluto was the mysterious Roman god of the dead and the lord of the underworld. And this is why I've got this little display happening here. We've got a face mask from the Day of the Dead here, some dead dried flowers. These are things that Pluto correlates to. We also have a succulent. Pluto rules succulents and cactuses. We're going to talk more about what Pluto rules shortly, but I just thought I'd explain why I've got that little display beside me to symbolize Pluto. He was the lord of the dead, the lord of the underworld. He was also known as the bringer of wealth, or the god of great wealth. So the name Pluto means the unseen one, and this is why Pluto was given this name, because he had been unseen and now was seen. So very pertinent to the astronomical naming of Pluto, which I've just described. Pluto lived in underground, gloomy places, and he seemed to, as a god, have very little interest in the world of men. But similarly, he also had very little interest in the affairs of the gods as well, and he tended to avoid associating with men and gods. He was very much the loner god. He was a figure in ancient mythology of enormous dread, terrible might, like very powerful god. And he was a god who dispensed luck and controlled the fates of mortals. Pretty full on, hey? He ruled the regions within the earth and everything that came out of inner earth, so to speak, the minerals, the precious stones. And this is part of the reason he was known as the god of great wealth. Pluto was the Roman counterpart to the Greek god Hades. And Hades was the Greek god who ruled the underworld in Greek mythology. Pluto rode a chariot and he carried a staff in his hand, and he was often accompanied by Cerberus, a three-headed dog that served as both his pet and a guardian of the underworld. And if you've watched movies and so forth about mythology, you probably will have seen that three-headed dog represented. I think it's in the film Clash of the Titans, if I'm not mistaken, old film from the 60s or 70s. But one of Pluto's most famous myths centered around his abduction of the young woman Persephone and the grief of her mother, the goddess Ceres. So Pluto, this loner god living in the gloomy underworld, rarely interacting with gods or mankind, was pitied by the goddess Venus. So she told her son Cupid to fire one of his love arrows at Pluto so that he would fall in love with the next woman that he saw. And that woman was Persephone. She was playing in the fields at Nysa. So his passion and his desire was uncontrollable because of this arrow that had been fired at him by Cupid. Keep that passion and desire element in mind. It's very pertinent to the astrology of Pluto, actually. So in his passion, in his desire, he abducted Persephone in his chariot. And following her abduction, her mother, Ceres, searched high and low for her missing daughter in a panic and grief. And her search was fruitless because nobody knew where she'd gone. Persephone was in the underworld, and she became there the unwilling bride of Pluto. People in some mythologies refer to it as the rape of Persephone. But in essence, she became the queen of the underworld. Pluto, on the other hand, he refused to acknowledge that he had kidnapped her. He refused to even let it be known where she was, so she was being held in secret. I mean, one of these horrible experiences, and it brings to mind all these dreadful experiences that we sometimes hear in the news about abductions and kidnapping, and people have been held prisoner for years and so on, and what grief that must cause the parents and family involved. Ceres, similarly, grew very thin. She grew pale and emaciated due to her great grief, her sorrow, and her constant searching for her daughter. Now, Ceres was the goddess of agriculture and fertility. And because of her sorrow and her emaciated appearance, it correlated to what was happening on the earth, and the earth suffered. The land and the animals became barren and infertile. Agriculture suffered because the goddess governing those things was not in her power. She was grieving. Now, Mercury, the messenger god, informed Jupiter of Persephone's whereabouts. He happened to have heard on the grapevine where she was, and he let Jupiter know where she was. And Jupiter ordered his brother Pluto, because Jupiter was the king of the gods and everybody sort of bowed down to Jupiter. He was the rescuer, the hero who saved them from their father. So Jupiter ordered that Pluto release Persephone at once, and he did that because he wanted to restore the fertility to the earth. And of course, Pluto had to comply to avoid the wrath of his brother, the king of the gods, Jupiter. So having no choice, Pluto returned Persephone, but on the proviso that she had not eaten anything while she was in the underworld, because if she had, she would therefore belong to the underworld if she'd ingested anything that came from the underworld. And it was discovered that Persephone had consumed a few pomegranate seeds while she was in the underworld. And so Pluto demanded that Persephone should remain with him for a portion of each year. Jupiter agreed to this demand because she had consumed fruit from the underworld, pomegranate seeds. And so he ordered that Persephone would spend half her time with Ceres on the earth and half her time with Pluto in the underworld. And now we see this represented in the seasons. You know, Persephone leaves the earth in early autumn, and we start to, things die down, things get cold and wintry, the earth is infertile and frozen and barren, and she returns back to Ceres. Persephone comes back to her mother in early spring. And this is obviously when things begin to bloom, the days get warmer, and we find that things start to fruit and flourish again. So during her absence, Ceres is grieving and the world grows barren. And when she returns, the world flourishes back to life. And you notice the symbology here? Death and rebirth, very much associated with the essence of Pluto. That he rules death, but he is also associated with the rebirthing phase due to this mythology. So due to Pluto's mysterious nature and his association with death, he was not a central figure in the worship of Roman state religion. So there were no state festivals, no temples, no dedications in his honor. He had little to do with the world of men, and men tended, the world of mankind tended to avoid him as well. So let's talk about Pluto in astrology. This gets really interesting and exciting. Pluto is the modern ruler of the sign of Scorpio, and like the mysterious water sign, they do share many similarities in the things that they govern. Now, Pluto is really the planet that defines the 20th century, the century that's just been, because he entered our collective consciousness. In other words, he was discovered and we became aware of him in 1930. Now, obviously, he had existed for millennia before that, but we only found out about Pluto as human beings on the Earth in 1930. And so Pluto has connections to everything that manifested around that time, sort of within 20 years either side of 1930. Now, this includes atomic energy, nuclear power, plutonium, weapons of mass destruction. Those heavy-duty things that I've just mentioned, I mean, imagine the permanent winter that would be visited upon the Earth in the event of a nuclear holocaust. Persephone might never return if those things were unleashed on the Earth. Pluto has governance of those things. Let's hope they're never unleashed, because we rather enjoy having Persephone return in the springtime. So the Pluto in Leo generation, I'll talk about the generations of Pluto in just a second. The Pluto in Leo generation were the first full generation born into the conscious awareness of Pluto. So Pluto was halfway through the sign of Cancer when he was discovered. And so by the time the Pluto and Leo generation, the baby boomers, were being born, everybody knew about Pluto. He was in full conscious awareness. So the Pluto and Leo generation, all of them, everyone born with Pluto and Leo, hold this awareness and their consciousness and their human state of Pluto and his amazing power, amazing and terrifying power. And it's really interesting to me to observe what's going on in the world now in 2022 as I'm recording this, that it's the Pluto and Leo generation that are holding the power of Pluto in their hands. And the eventuality of whether we go into a nuclear winter or not is in the hands of the leaders of our day and age, which, for better or worse, are the Pluto in Leo generation. So Pluto is the planet that defines the generations. Let me go through the examples. And as I do this, you'll see how Pluto spends different lengths of time in different signs because he has this very strange orbit. So Pluto was in Leo from 1937 to 1956. He was 19 years in the sign of Leo. This is the baby boomer generation. Pluto was in Virgo from 1956 to 1971. 15 years. You can see it's getting less. 15 years in the sign of Virgo. This is the Generation X or the group one, if you like, of Generation X. And then Pluto was in Libra from 1971 to 1983, 13 years in this sign. It's getting less again. This was group 2 of Generation X, because some people in this generation classify themselves as Generation X. But I have read that this generation is also known as the Xennials, Xennials, the Xennials. Then Pluto was in Scorpio from 1983 to 1985. Only 12 years in the sign of Scorpio. This is where Pluto spends his shortest length of time, in the sign of Scorpio. And this is Gen Y, the millennials, Pluto and Scorpio generation. I'm excited by this generation because it's this generation, Gen Y, the millennials, and because they are born with Pluto in Scorpio, the sign that Pluto rules, they are waking the world up to the power of astrology and the occult again. And they're very intense. They're a very intense generation. We'll find out why, because as we go along here, because Pluto is a very intense planet, powerful people, powerful generation, powerful planet in a very powerful position. So this generation are going to be the movers and shakers. They're going to be the ones who change the world and hopefully regenerate the world and bring the springtime back to the world from what has been stolen, which I believe has been stolen over the last 80 years or so. And we're getting up to sort of 90 to 100 years since Pluto has been discovered. So very interesting generation to keep an eye on. The Pluto in Sagittarius generation goes from 1995 to 2008. Pluto was 13 years in this sign. This is Generation Z. Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto spent 15 years in the sign of Capricorn from 2008 to 2023. Now we're coming to the conclusion of the Pluto in Capricorn years, and it has been said that this is known as Generation Alpha, this particular generation. Then from 2023 to 2043, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius. And this is going to be 20 years in this sign. A new generation will begin in 2023. Pluto will then be in Pisces from 2043 to 2068, 25 years in the sign of Pisces. He's going to be 29 years in the sign of Aries, which is going to last from 2068 to 2097. Then he's going to move into Taurus for 33 years. And you know, Taurus sits opposite Scorpio. This is where Pluto spends the longest duration, 33 years in the sign of Taurus from 2097 to 2130. 2130 is when that period, that generation is going to end. And then we will have Pluto in Gemini. That's going to be for 30 years. Now the length of time in a sign starts to decrease. This is going to last from 2130 to 2160, 30 years in the sign of Gemini. And then Pluto in Cancer from 2160 to 2186, 26 years in the sign of Cancer. And then we're back to Pluto in Leo all over again. So that's how Pluto governs the generations. It's a very generational planet, and we define our generational influences by the length of time Pluto spends in each sign. So in any singular lifetime, Pluto is only ever going to transit 3 to at most 6 houses, because he just takes that long to move through a sign. So therefore, the transits of Pluto that you will have in your lifetime are extremely important to your life. You incarnated to experience those particular transits for the growth of your soul, for better or worse. Now, not everyone's going to experience a transit of Pluto to the powerful first house, but those that do will experience life-changing results. Not everyone's going to experience a transit of Pluto to the 10th house, but those that do are likely to go through a powerful change in how they are perceived by the world at large. Not everyone's going to go through a Pluto transit to the 3rd house, but those that do will experience extraordinary up-leveling of intuition and communicative skills. So wherever Pluto is making his transits over the course of your lifetime, is just what your soul needs for your growth. So Pluto is the expression, this is what Pluto rules in astrology, what he's all about in astrology. He is power and powerful people, control, hidden realms, anything that's taboo, anything that brings a crisis into our life. Nuclear holocaust, big time crisis, that's Pluto. You know, any type of crisis is a Pluto event. Pluto also has to do with purging in our life, releasing, letting go of, excreting and getting rid of things. That's Pluto. Pluto also rules renewal. Hence we have that mythology of the renewal of the springtime after the winter. Death and rebirth, renewal, transformation. Big mythology of change, you know, winter to spring, that transformation from cold to warmth, from death to life. Pluto rules those things. Anything in life that brings a transformation is from Pluto, or considered a Plutonian experience. Pluto rules rebirthing, regeneration, renovation. He brings hidden things that are secret, out into the light. Remember his name and the meaning of his name, that which is hidden. And then he's been discovered in our lifetime. We have brung the hidden things into the light. Pluto rules, or has to do with having incredible ambition, second to none. People with Pluto strong in their chart, on the ascendant or conjunct with the sun or the moon, maybe on the midheaven as well. People who have Pluto strong in their chart are the masters of ambition, the masters of hustle. They get things done. They make it happen, because that's what Pluto's all about. In a sense, Pluto is a bit like Jupiter. Jupiter amplifies in astrology whatever it connects with, or wherever it sits in a horoscope. Jupiter makes it bigger, larger, bigger than life. However, rather than amplification, Pluto, because amplification is Jupiter, Pluto tends to give tremendous power to wherever it sits in life. For example, Pluto in a conjunction with Venus gives powerful desires and powerful passions. Just like in the mythology, when Venus told her son to fire the arrow at Pluto, what did it give to Pluto? Powerful desire, powerful passion. Same deal in astrology. When Venus and Pluto are sitting together in the chart, powerful desire, powerful passion present in your life. When Pluto sits with the sun, you get a powerful ego, a powerful sense of identity. Wherever Pluto sits, whatever planet it sits with, whatever house it's in, it's going to empower that realm of our life. So there's tremendous intensity wherever Pluto sits in a chart. Pluto strong people can actually be very intense people, because Pluto's an intense planet, and they can often be very polarizing. Why is that? Well, we are at one end of the solar system, sitting up near the sun, getting nice and warm. Where's the other end? The polaric opposite, Pluto, right out in the Kuiper Belt. Pluto can be polarizing. We either love Pluto people or they turn us right off and we want to have nothing to do with them. Madonna has Pluto in her first house, those who are familiar with the singer Madonna from the 80s and early 90s. And I always found her to be one of the most polarizing celebrities. I couldn't understand why everybody liked her so much. Okay, her music was fine and everything, but as a person, I just found her completely off-putting. And that's my opinion, which I'm entitled to. You're entitled to yours. But she has Pluto in her first house. And people either loved her to bits or they just were like, what the? No way. So Madonna is a perfect example of how polarizing, to my mind, a Plutonian type person can be. Pluto is a planet that decomposes. That's what death does. It sort of eats away at things, the maggots and the what have you, eating away at the flesh, decomposes things. Pluto also composts things. And what do we do when we compost something? We throw it on our plants, we throw it on our garden. And what happens then? The daffodils come up, the roses bloom brighter and stronger and with greater scent. Our decomposition, our composting of whatever's going on in our life gives a rebirth to fruiting and flourishing. That's Pluto energy. The phoenix bird is also associated with Pluto. What is the phoenix bird all about? The death. If you've watched Maleficent, the film Maleficent, very Plutonian character, Maleficent. What happens in the sequel to Maleficent? She, not to give the plot away, but she dies and is reborn as the phoenix bird. So very Plutonian imagery. Again, Pluto is the ancient god of great wealth, as well as the god of the underworld in mythology. So in our underworld times, when we go through the darkness, when we go through the shadow period of our life, the deep journey of the soul, then we often discover the hidden reserves of personal power in those times. We discover enlightenment in that dark night of the soul. We discover the resilience within which transforms us and enables us to emerge into our power, into our springtime, out of the darkness into the springtime. So this is what true wealth is. Yes, Pluto also has connections to physical wealth, to jewels and gold and things that come from within the earth and the wealth that it generates. Definitely has connections to that. But true wealth is found when we've gone through the dark night of the soul, our underworld experiences, our inner battle psychologically, and we've come out the other side. We've faced death, and death no longer has any fear for us because we've been into the darkness and we emerge into our power and our springtime. People with Pluto strong in their chart tend to go through times like that in life that transform them. And, they might start out in life with their power taken away from them through sickness or through abuse or difficulties or whatever. But when they go through the darkness and they emerge out the other side, they stand in their power, having overcome the sickness, the abuse, the darkness that their life has represented. Pluto strong people have a difficult course to chart in life, but a great personal power that they can generate that can serve them well once they emerge into their springtime and take their power back. Now, there is a shadow side to Pluto, if you haven't already gathered. What I've talked about is perhaps the more positive sides of Pluto that we can work with and utilize: personal power, great wealth, composting and rebirthing ourselves. These are actually positives that we can utilize in our life, transformation. But there is a very dark side to Pluto, naturally. Cruelty and abuse are associated with Pluto, and usually we find those exhibiting when we find Pluto in hard aspect with Mars, or occasionally with Saturn as well. Pluto expresses either as the giver of the abuse. So if you've got Pluto, let's say in a conjunction with Mars, for example, it's not always going to exhibit this way, but it can work out through that conjunction of Mars and Pluto, that we are the giver of abuse to others. We're abusive. But it can also work out that people with Pluto-Mars conjunction are also the recipients of the abuse in life. So if you have a Pluto-Mars conjunction, you might have experienced a lot of abuse in your life. And you need to be very consciously aware of not becoming the abuser who gives it out to others because you've suffered it. So cruelty and abuse are the shadow side that we see with Pluto energy. Pluto also is willpower. Now that can be positive if we're using our willpower to overcome our life's difficulties, but willpower that destroys things, ambition that stops at nothing, is the shadow side of Pluto energy. And many politicians and successful people have a strong Pluto in their chart because they have this ruthless ambition, this willpower that stops at nothing to dominate and control everything. That's the shadow. That's another shadow side of Pluto, and it's really heavy duty. Pluto strong people can be edge walkers. What do I mean by that? Well, think about it. Pluto resides on the edge of the solar system. Thus, he represents the edge of our conscious knowledge. risk takers in a very dark sense of the word, people who err on almost the evil side. They're willing to go to the edge and associate with nasty people and make deals with the devil and those sorts of things. Now, you can be an edge walker in positive Pluto energy as well, and this would look like somebody who enjoys extreme sports or someone who loves mystery and crime novels. My kids are actually very into this, to be honest. They love the sort of like the horror-y kind of scary films and that sort of thing. They love the sort of dark fairy tales and that kind of stuff. So that's things that get your adrenaline pumping, things that get you on the edge of your seat. That's what it means to be an edge walker, and that's the positive expression. If you've got Pluto strong in your chart and you want to counteract any sort of evil inclinations, then go and read lots of crimes and thrillers and horrors. Get into that stuff. Read up about serial killers and deep psychological understanding of the criminal mind, and research those things, because the more you get involved in the positive expression of Pluto energy, the less you're going to have a desire to go into the ruthless, evil, cruel, other shadow side that is Pluto energy. Now, I've talked a lot about the darkness of Pluto in this introduction, and I want to come back to what I talked about earlier now, which is what the New Horizons probe discovered when it flew past Pluto in 2015, and that was the heart, the beating heart on the side of Pluto. This is very much an as above, so below principle that we're seeing here. Pluto has a heart. He did have a heart in mythology. He fell passionately in love with Persephone. Okay, well, he was cruel and he, abducted her and what have you. But there is a heart there that feels things deeply. Plutonian people do feel very deeply, very intensely, very passionately. This heart on the side of Pluto should represent to us the passion that is available to us. We all have Pluto somewhere in the chart. We all have passions and desires in relation to something in our life. And it is okay to honor those things, heart-centered. And I want to just bring to light the awareness that often when we go through our shadow experiences, our darkness, our, the evil side of who we are, or we're in a state of melancholy and depression and deep struggle with life, we're in our underworld phase. Just know, if you're going through that at the moment, if you're experiencing fear or trauma of some sort, that you have the ability within you to regenerate and rebirth and come back with a strong heart that is capable of loving again, that is capable of experiencing and feeling once more good things in the sunshine and the springtime. Pluto has a heart. There is gold in the underworld experiences that you have, and there is a renewal in the underworld experiences that you go through, and we all go through them. There is also love at the core of what Pluto does in our life. Why? Because Pluto really does want to heal us, because he loves us. A couple of my girlfriends and I have had many discussions, my astrologically minded girlfriends have had many discussions about Pluto. A number of my highly intuitive girlfriends believe that Pluto is actually a feminine planet. Now, he was an ancient god of masculine quality, but there is also something deeply passionately feminine, and Pluto rules a feminine sign, Scorpio. I'm not here to get into a debate about whether or not Pluto is a masculine or feminine planet or energy. That's something that you're welcome to do in the discussion comments section. But I do want people to keep in mind that Pluto has a heart, that there is a purpose to your underworld experiences. And if you see your difficult experiences in life as a chance to renew yourself and discover the gold and the strength within you, the power that is within you, then you will come out victorious. there is purpose to Pluto difficulties. That said, Pluto in karmic astrology is one of the most powerful planets. He is the planet of trauma and the trauma of our past lives. He represents that in the chart, where our traumas in past lives have come from. Plus, he also represents the antidote to our trauma, the healing of our trauma, the renewal of ourselves after our karmic darkness. So if you're interested in karmic astrology, then do come study with me at the Royal Stars Academy. We will be exploring Pluto karma in greater depth in the courses that I offer there. So just to briefly sum up with a few things that Pluto rules, like I said, succulents and cactus, dead things, festivals that have to do with death and rebirth. Pluto rules blowflies. Pluto rules toilets and plumbing. Pluto rules poisonous animals, abduction, obviously. Pluto rules cesspools. Pluto rules sex organs. Pluto rules the subconscious workings of the mind and the body. Pluto rules bombs. Pluto rules Godivas, catacombs, cemeteries. Pluto rules pests and pest control, plutonium, murder, monsters. Pluto rules psychology. Pluto rules sex, snakes, sorcerers. Pluto rules the subterranean realms of the earth. He rules taxation, terrorism, toilets, tombs. Pluto rules laser beams, kidnapping, marshes, massacres. Pluto rules masochism. Now, I need to just quantify that one or clarify that one. Pluto rules masochism in the sense of cruelty to others. That's the Plutonian side of masochism. Neptune also has associations with masochism in the sense that Neptune rules the self-debasement aspect of masochism. Okay, just to make clear that one. Anything morbid is ruled by Pluto. Anything black, which is why I'm wearing black for this series, is ruled by Pluto. Nuclear scientists are ruled by Pluto. Violence is ruled by Pluto. Wars, X-rays, victims, venom, vampires. Hope you got all those things down. There are a few things, and I hope that gives you some of the essence of this nuclear atomic planet that we are all living with in our charts these days. So let's move on now and see what Pluto represents for us when he transits certain houses in the horoscope. So how do we tell if we have Pluto transiting through our 11th house? Well, it's really very simple. Firstly, we need to know where Pluto is transiting in the sky. And as I'm recording this in 2022, for the next 20 years, Pluto is going to be in the sign of Aquarius. So we know that. Pluto is in Aquarius. If you're looking at this after 2042, Pluto will be in Pisces. So that's where you look if you're watching this video then. So all we need to do is count how many houses from our rising sign to Aquarius to know what house Pluto is transiting. And in this instance, Aries rising. If we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, will give us the 11th house. So for anyone who's Aries rising, next 20 years, you're going to have Pluto transiting your 11th house. Now, this is using whole sign astrology as well, okay? I do have a video on my channel if you want to know about whole sign astrology and how it works. Check that out if you're unsure. So all we need to do to work out where Pluto is transiting is count how many signs from our rising sign to wherever Pluto is. That tells us what house Pluto is transiting. And in this case, it's the 11th. What does this mean for us? Well, it means we become very passionate. Pluto is passion. We become very passionate about whatever makes us happy, our enjoyment, our personal gratification. Now, these are things to do with the 11th house. It's a good house, the 11th house. It's a joyful house. So we're going to be very passionate, very enthused about what makes us happy. And that's why it's the house of goals and dreams and aspirations, because what makes us happy? Seeing our goals and dreams and aspirations fulfilled. So hence Pluto here is going to make us very passionate about those things. We will be keen to enjoy our lives. Now this comes after Pluto's transit of the 10th house, which was all about creating our place in the world, creating a sense of identity in the world. And so once we've created this identity in the world, then we're ready to enjoy what we've built during Pluto's transit through the 10th house. So that's why this house, 11th house, is about happiness, enjoyment, and fulfillment that results from creating our place in the world. So our goals and ambitions, which are 11th house things, they can really change significantly because Pluto is, as we know, the planet of transformation and change. So we might start this transit out with certain goals and ambitions, but by the time this transit ends, by the time Pluto reaches the end of Aquarius, our goals and aspirations and ambitions might be completely different. Now, this will usually happen, especially if previous goals have had to do with duty and responsibility. By the time Pluto gets to the end of Aquarius in this transit, our goals might have nothing to do with, responsibility and duty, which they might be in the beginning. So maybe we had aspirations to provide a good home for our family, and that was our goal, that was our dream. But by the end of this 20-year period of Pluto in Aquarius, our goal might be to expand our wings a little more and have more fun and see more of the world and go and visit some other countries perhaps. So completely different goals and aspirations and dreams. So there's a deep commitment when Pluto transits through the 11th house, and a commitment to attaining our most genuine desires and our ideals, to bringing them to fruition, not just having them out there in the ether, putting them in the vortex kind of thing. No, we want to see them manifest. And so Pluto here gives us a lot of drive, willpower, energy towards seeing our goals and dreams manifest. This is also the house of friends and our associations, and these things can change too and transform when Pluto transits through the 11th house. They're going to get a lot of disruption in our friendship circles. Now, I have been having a Pluto transit to the 11th house since 2008, and let me just tell you, the friendship circles I have now are completely, 100%, utterly different to the friends I had back then. I barely have a friend left from the friendship groups I had prior to this. So I'm not meaning to scare you by saying, oh, your friends are going to all leave you and everything. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But you're going to change so much through this transit. You're going to transform so much that the friends who stood by you in one phase of your being, they're going to not cut the mustard anymore because you're going to be a different person. And so you're going to gravitate more to different groups of friends who have different ideals, different personas, different ways of being that are more suited to who you're becoming. So don't be afraid of this. Like for me, in my example, I'm not in a state of animosity with anybody I knew before. That's not the issue. But the people who are closest to me, who've got my back and who I care about the most in friendship terms, they are actually completely different people. It's just the transit of Pluto through the 11th house. Transformation of friendships, a big indicator. This is nothing to be afraid of, because where you lose friends, you will create space for new friends to come in. Different friendships that are perhaps more on par with you. Nowadays, my friends are more astrological. Back then, they were very religious. Hence, I've been through the change, from moving from religion to astrology, and that's been reflected in my friendship circles. So don't be afraid of this. You will get new friends who will replace the vacant space left by the old friends. But be aware of subconsciously dominating and manipulating others and your friends as well, because that's the shadow side of Pluto. As we know, Pluto will try to control other people or manipulate other people into doing certain things for us if we allow his shadow expression to exhibit, or we might let other people be doing that to us. Our friends trying to control us, manipulate us, dominate us. I'm not going to be your friend unless you do X, Y, Z, which of course is not true friendship if that's what we're being told. So be aware of that sort of thing, that tendency for us to either dominate, manipulate and control, or for our friends to be doing that to us. And as I said, friends that no longer serve who we are becoming in this world will end, but it's not going to just happen like that. This is a 20-year transit. You'll find that this will sort of happen almost imperceptibly, sort of disintegrate bit by bit by bit over a 20-year period, and find that one friend after another sort of falls by the wayside, so to speak. And you might connect every now and again, but it's just not the same, So don't be afraid of this. It's going to be almost a subtle kind of process. But we will also take complete responsibility for our friendships and for the changes in our friendships. I realize with what's happened to me over the last 20 years, it's been my doing because, like I said, I've changed. Therefore, my friendship groups have changed. So it's entirely the onus is on me. We take responsibility for the changes in our friendship groups. Now, if Pluto forms a hard aspect during this transit to the Lord of the 11th house, then we might have serious troubles with friendships and even traumatically lose friends. Now, and I'll use this example from my own life. My Lord of the 11th house sits opposite the 11th house in the 5th house. So when Pluto made an aspect to the Lord of the 11th house sitting opposite down in this realm of the chart in the 5th house, when that occurred, there was an incident where it was really traumatic. There was a friend that I had counted on and leaned on, who I thought was there for me, more than anybody else had been through the upheavals of my life, suddenly pulled the rug out from under me, and I was shocked and astounded, for no reason whatsoever. And this person just disappeared. Best friends one day, practically, and then haven't spoken to her since. Heartbreaking, very, very sad, but that was a result of Pluto making an opposition, which is a hard aspect, to the 11th house Lord. So that's really, when Pluto is making a hard aspect to your 11th house Lord during this transit, that's really the time that there might be some troubles with friendship. The rest of the time, it's just dissolving, disintegrating away, because Pluto is to compost things. So friendships become composted. You sort of dissolve them away, and then they transform into a different kind of friendship with different groups of people. But there can be serious upheavals if Pluto is making an opposition to the 11th house Lord, or a square. So if you've got your 11th house Lord sitting in the 8th house, in the 5th house, or in the 2nd house, Pluto will make a hard aspect. And therefore, you can expect that there might be a sudden shock or upheaval that comes with a certain... You probably won't know which friendship it will be. It will be so surprising to you. So forewarned, forearmed that can happen. If it does, you'll know why. Now, if Pluto makes trines or sextiles to the 11th house Lord in the natal chart, you might find that you're raised up by very influential friends, that you're blessed by very influential friends who can pull some strings and get you the job of your dreams, or enable you to move from one country to another and, just be there to support you. So really good things can happen as a result of our friendships if Pluto is trining or sextile. So that means if you have your 11th house Lord trining the 3rd house, so the 11th house Lord here in the 3rd house, or in the 7th house, that makes a trine. Or if your 11th house Lord, and for the next 20 years, the 11th house Lord is going to be Saturn in traditional astrology, or Uranus in modern astrology. The other places for sextiles are if Uranus, in this case, the 11th house Lord, or Saturn, the 11th house Lord, are in the 1st house, or in the 9th house. Then Pluto, at some point over the next 20 years, will sextile those planets and bring blessing into your life from your friends. Very nice if that happens. Now, other things that can occur when Pluto transits the 11th house is we might meet some influential people who will affect our lives for years to come. Perhaps not friends in this case, but just people who uplift us, people who bless us, people who give us a leg up in the world, those sorts of occurrences that help, people who help us achieve our goals and dreams, essentially. Something to be celebrated and delighted in. We all love those moments when somebody, has got our back. They're like the wind in our sails. Friendships during this time are going to be very much defined by intense experiences, emotionality, and even passionate commonality. The new friends that I have gained during this time are people who are true kindred spirits, soulmates, I would even call them. People who I know have my back no matter what, and we have this very intense connection that's really been forged in the fire a lot of the time, through trials, through difficulties, through the struggles of life. We have created a friendship that is very, very foundational for us now. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't stand or have the potential to be destroyed down the track, because who can say? These things can occur. I just know that with Pluto finishing up his time in my 11th house, that period of redefinition and transformation and reorientation with my friendship groups is coming to an end. And so the friends I've got now are solid and strong. So that's another thing. People who are spiritual can have a great fascination for us and a big draw for us. So it could be spiritual friends, but it could be inspirational people, benefactors who are very spiritual, that sort of thing as well. We're drawn to spiritual people, and certainly during this time of my life, I came across the works of Louise Hay, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Lada from Astrolada, Stephen Forrest. You know, I could go on with all the incredible list of astrologers that have blessed my life. And so these sorts of, you know, spiritual people, I wouldn't say gurus, that's a ninth house thing, but people who bless our lives, who uplift us in some way, are definitely 11th house kind of benefactors. So we're going to encounter more of those sorts of people during this time. We could even feel surrounded by Plutonian people. Now, what are Plutonian people in the positive? They're charismatic people, they're effective people, they're go-getters, they're people with a strong willpower. Or we might be surrounded by Plutonian people in the shadow side, utterly ruthless people, manipulative people, people who are jealous and obsessive, or highly karmic people that we need to, I would dare say, we need to wrap up some karma with, so we never have to deal with them again. So Plutonian people, or simply just people with a lot of Pluto energy in their chart. Pluto rising, or many aspects to Pluto in their chart would make somebody quite a Plutonian person. Or if Pluto is with the sun or the moon as well. Now, there will be a lot of clarity during this time about your dreams and goals. If you've been a bit fluffy about it, a bit sort of ambiguous, a bit I don't really know what I want to do with my life, then Pluto moving into the 11th house can absolutely redefine those things for you and give you like a beacon to what you want to do, who you want to be, where you want to go. Very me. I dabbled in so many different things prior to Pluto moving into my 11th house in 2008. And then what happened from there on? Astrology. And it just became the big drive for me. So we become clearer about our goals and dreams. And that's really a beautiful component of this particular transit. Now, our expectations about life can go through rather a radical transformation. Remember, Pluto is transformation. So here in the 11th house of, you know, what we expect to get out of life, you know, your expectations can really change. When I first, and I keep referring to me because this transit's fairly recent for me, when I had this occur, my expectations for life in 2008 were the white picket fence, the 3.5 children, happy husband, happy wife, you know, all the traditional ideas about what life should look like. In comes Pluto, kaboom. Now, you know, my expectations for what life should be, what life should look like, are like completely different. I've become actually a lot more flexible and flowing, and you know, whatever the universe wants to do is fine by me. You know, if I end up living by a tent by the river, okay, I'll flow with that. If I end up, you know, living in Monte Carlo, cool, whatever the universe wants to do. Become much more flexible, quite honestly. But my expectations have all but been composted by Pluto. I have no expectations anymore. I have no, it's not that I don't have any dreams or goals, I absolutely do. But my expectations are practically non-existent, you know. Whatever the universe does, I'm just going to go with the flow. So we can also increase our desire to serve the world, because this is a humanitarian house. We become, you know, we want to help the world, we want to heal the world, we want to, you know, sort of be part of groups and movements that change things for the better. And so Pluto here puts a lot of focus on this and a lot of intensity upon these kinds of activities. Some people with this transit might find that their potential to earn and receive is increased. So a lot of people during the next 20 years with this transit might end up getting significant pay rises or rising up into positions of power, but not power that's uncompromisingly ruthless, but more powerful positions that enable them to help humanity, you know, like head of Doctors Without Borders or something like that. Or, you know, you move into a position of power, Pluto, that is going to help create more freedom, equity, justice, and blessing in the world. In fact, we become passionate, whether we get a high-ranking role or, you know, a high-earning role in those sorts of fields. Whether we're in that, is kind of immaterial, because all of us who are having this transit become more passionate about freedom, passionate about independence, justice, and equality. And, you know, I've always had a drive, because I am quite a Uranian person, and Uranus is very connected to the 11th house. I've always had a drive for freedom and independence and self-sufficiency, and nobody's going to tell me what to do, and I'm not going to owe anybody anything, and I'm doing it my way. That's 11th house energy, Uranian energy as well, Aquarian energy. But we're going to become passionate about that sort of thing now. If we weren't before, we will become that now. The drive becomes stronger. So maybe, I don't know, have your own self-sufficient farm, or create more freedom in the world, or to set people who are imprisoned free, who do not deserve to be there. We're advocates for justice, and we might start fighting for justice. We might start, you know, crowdfunding campaigns to release certain political prisoners and so forth. You know, this is the kind of thing we become passionate about, that sort of stuff, when we have Pluto transiting the 11th house. Now, some people say that Pluto is exalted in Leo, and there are others say that Pluto is exalted in Pisces. We're going to be talking about these two components in this video and the subsequent one that's coming after this, Pluto in the 12th house. Now, if the truth is that Pluto is exalted in Leo, it means that Pluto is in fall in Aquarius. So here's Leo, which is Aries people's 5th house, which means that the fall, the place of detriment for Pluto, the place where Pluto does not have enough energy, enough oomph, is in Aquarius, which I've got to say would be rather a shame if this is the case. I sort of don't have an opinion on this yet. I haven't formed an opinion or researched it enough to have an opinion yet. But it would be unfortunate, because this is the house of the people and the masses. This is where we want Pluto to be powerful, to get behind us in rising up against the MFers who are trying to turn the world into a certain state of being to their greedy benefit. We need Pluto to be powerful in Aquarius. But if it is true that Pluto is exalted in Leo, it's therefore in fall in Aquarius, and therefore it corresponds to being in a difficult placement when it's in the 11th house. Aquarius and the 11th house have some connections. They're kind of bound up with similar themes. So as such, when Pluto travels through the 11th house, whether he's in Aquarius or some other sign, when he travels through the 11th house, we might experience these years as stressful and frustrating, especially if we have been unable to create the happiness and fulfillment that we desire in our lives. I have to say, just on this topic, that these years of my life since 2008 have been the hardest of my life so far. And I've been around a reasonable amount of time. So it has been really heavy duty, really heavy going. And to be perfectly honest, it's quite possible that this exaltation and fall idea is correct. If I was to just simply look at my life alone, at how stressful and frustrating these years of my life have been since Pluto moved into my 11th house. So do some observational work yourself. Does this appear to be the case in your life, or in, you know, other people you know who've had Pluto transit through the 11th house? And observe, what do you see? I'd love you to leave comments in the comment section below about whether you feel Pluto is in fall in Aquarius or the 11th house. What have you seen? What do you think of that idea? So what are the keys to working with this transit? Well, simply be open and flexible regarding friendships. That's an imperative. They're going to change significantly. So going with the flow, not taking anything personally, being willing to say goodbye when friendships end. This is imperative if you're to cope. If you take it personally, if you get upset about it, naturally we're going to be upset if there's something horrible happen with a friendship that's meant something to us. But realizing, okay, this is Pluto's energy. There's a purpose behind this. He's composting my friendships out so that a new friendship can rise up. The more that we can be a bit detached and recognize objectively what's going on, the more we are able to cope with this transit. I would be seeking out new friendships during these years if you feel that your life has become more lonely. If there's not an astrology group in your town and that's the kind of people you want to be friends with, other astrologers or people who love astrology, then go and start an astrology group, or find one if there's one that exists, or whatever it is that you're interested in. It could be philosophy, it could be sports, it could be, maybe you like watching the Kardashians, I don't know, but seek out friendships with people who are your people, your like-minded ones, if you are feeling lonely, because there may be some lonely times as Pluto does his composting work with our friendships. Honor your passions regarding social and humanitarian issues. So if you feel a pull to help free children from child slavery or pedophilia or something like that, oh, please get involved with that. We need people who are passionate and gutsy enough with a spine of steel to get in there and do something about those situations in life. If you're feeling like, I really care about the homeless. There's so many of them. There's so many women living in cars now and their children being raised without a home. They're living in a car. I want to get in and do something about this. Please honor your passions. This is the time. If ever there was a time to get involved in social causes, humanitarian issues, it's this time. Be very conscious also about your behavior towards other people, particularly friends. And remember, like I said, those shadow sides of Pluto. Regularly check in with yourself to assess if you're behaving in that negative, obsessive, jealous, manipulative Plutonian manner, or if they're behaving that way to you, and then make the appropriate changes as needed to navigate that. And support the power of clarity that comes with Pluto in the 11th house, knowing what you want and where you're going and what your dreams and goals are. Support that power of clarity that comes in by also regularly checking in with the self to understand what it is you want out of your life. And this could mean like something like journaling around these topics. And maybe you could ask yourself some questions like this. Okay, Kesenya, or whoever you are, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? In 10 years' time? In 20 years' time? These are healthy things to do, especially in the beginning stages of this transit. What goal am I most passionate about right now in my life? What does ultimate happiness look like to me? What am I doing to actively achieve these things in my life? There's some great questions, 4 great questions to ask yourself to sort of get the mental juices flowing and bring in more clarity as Pluto comes into your 11th house for the next 20 years. So that's what I'm seeing with regard to Pluto's transit of the 11th house. I hope this has proved helpful for you and gives you some guidance as to what to expect and how to navigate the coming years. And I hope you'll join me for the next video in this series and the final video in this series, Pluto transit through the 12th house. I'll catch you with that one next week.